Humans have long searched for the perfect political idealism. Monarchies are an example of this search, as are democracies, and there are many other idealisms that go along with them. Entire countries have been transformed, for better or for worse, by certain individuals who thought that their idealism would be best for their country. Some examples of this include the American Revolution or the French Revolution, the former which ended in triumph and the latter in tragedy. One can see that the transformation from one system to another spans across a spectrum from triumph to tragedy. One of the most tragic cases of this transformation is 20th century Russia. One man ultimately ended up with all the power, and his misuse of it is a horrific tragedy. In early 20th century Russia, Tsar Nicholas II was in the middle of a Tsarism crisis, which can be seen from his journal entries. The first entry shows his reaction to the revolutions happening in St. Petersburg, also known as Petrograd. What's happening there is obviously bad. Soon the Tsar central government fell and was replaced with a provisional government. The following report from a newspaper details the formation of a new provisional government. Of course, this government never really ruled Russia. The Petrograd Soviet decreed that the provisional government could only send out orders if the Petrograd Soviet agreed with them. This is why, from March until November 1917, Russia was ruled under a dual government. Soon, though, Lenin's Bolsheviks seized power in the October Revolution of 1917. The Russian Civil War rose up and the Red Army of the Bolsheviks crushed the White Army of the provisional government. Now, the Soviet Party had complete control of Russia, and though many separate countries had been formed, like Ukraine and the Balkans, Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, and other Soviet leaders had control of Russia. Communism was now the political idealism in Russia. Everything was going fine until Lenin died in 1924. The Communist Party was now missing a leader, and Joseph Stalin, a Georgian member of the Central Committee of the Bolsheviks, saw an opportunity to gain power. By 1930, he had outmaneuvered his rivals and denounced Leon Trotsky. Joseph Stalin was now the head of the Communist Party. As the one dictator of the Soviet Union, Stalin led the triumph of a second chance for Russia into a nightmarish tragedy for its inhabitants through political, economic, and militaristic means. When Stalin was making his way to the top, he had to outmaneuver his rivals through less than honorable means. He would obviously stop at nothing to secure his place at the top. This website, though in Russian, is the entire transcript of Stalin's speech on November 19, 1924. I read through most of the speech, and Stalin made very clear what his views were. 1. Leon Trotsky is not the hero that many people think he is. 2. Leon Trotsky's political idealism is in direct contradiction with Leninism, which is the best type of communism. And 3. The government should be solid and unchanging. First, Stalin declares that Trotsky was not the hero of the October Revolution. This is fair because he was not the mastermind of the uprising. But Stalin goes further with this, denouncing him further, saying that himself and Lenin played more important roles. This puts in the mind of the audience an assumption about Trotsky's character. An assumption that Trotsky is a snake and seeks to take away the glory from Lenin and Stalin. This is how Stalin manipulates the political landscape. He puts distrust in the hearts of the men listening. Stalin also asserts that Trotsky's political view, Trotskyism, is in contradiction with Leninism and is therefore unacceptable. Stalin finds the idea of Trotsky's permanent revolution revolting. He calls the political theory strange and seems to think that a change would be unwelcome. He reveals that Trotskyism attacks Lenin directly, even under a guise. Apparently, Stalin thinks that newer ideas should be vanquished. Trotsky's continuous revolution implies constant change and adaptation, while Stalin seeks to keep the government the same and unchanging, securing Stalin in his seat of power. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, Leon Trotsky was exiled to the outer edges of the Soviet Union. After that, Stalin finally got rid of him, pushing him out of the Soviet Union altogether and ridding himself of his political enemy. The absence of Trotsky, and therefore the absence of a voice of change in the Soviet Union, would be harmful to the growing population. Without the government's ability to adapt and change, Russia couldn't adapt to change and issues in the world. As dictator of the Soviet Union, Stalin adopted the infamous 5-year plans. These plans were instituted in order to rapidly industrialize the Soviet Union. The first 5-year plan was bent on collectivizing farming so that Stalin could feed the growing population. There was only one thing in the way of Stalin's plan: the kulaks. The kulaks were wealthy farmers and were an entire class by themselves. Stalin reasoned with them many times, but they would not listen. The kulaks resisted, and Stalin was obviously getting restless with them. Instead of coming to a compromise and being more tactful with the kulaks, Stalin decided to kill or imprison the entire kulak class. That's right, this resolution shows the plans to execute, send to concentration camps, and send to the gulag the kulak class. Stalin destroyed an entire class of farmers because he wasn't flexible enough to accept that the kulaks didn't like collectivization, so he destroyed them. After the kulaks were gone, people everywhere in Russia starved. These pictures depict starving children amidst the Holodomor, or the Ukrainian famine. Stalin, because he just had to collectivize farming, starved over 6 million people. Stalin dictated over a large country, so he would need strict laws, and therefore someone to enforce them. The NKVD were Stalin's night police. In 1936, the Great Purge began. This was an elimination of all those who had even remote ties to the enemies of the Soviets. This picture shows one of the massacres that the NKVD were capable of. Many people lie dead on the ground, and it depicts the ruthlessness of the NKVD. The purge began with the assassination of Sergei Kirov, a communist leader whose social standing threatened Stalin's seat of power. The Communist Party soon after began ridding itself of those politically and socially undesirable. The highest estimate of the Great Purge deaths is 20 million. Stalin ordered the deaths, either directly or indirectly, of millions of his own people. To stabilize his seat of power and rule over the people, he killed millions. This graph shows the annual GDP, or gross domestic product, of Russia throughout the 20th century. The red line that dips extremely low is from World War I. The GDP lingers there for a bit, but directly after Stalin takes power in 1924, it jumps higher than it ever was before. I have to admit, it does seem like Stalin did the right thing there, rapidly industrializing Russia, but one can never forget that he killed millions and then, directly after, starved millions. Yes, he triumphed in bringing the GDP up again, but the tragedy, millions dying, is far, far greater. Stalin may have caused immeasurable pain and suffering 100 years ago, but why did his actions matter in the future of Russia and the world? First, Stalin's hand pushed communism outward. The Red Scare took America by storm in the late 1940s and early 1950s. China's sudden conversion to communism, the Soviet atomic bomb test, and the terror that came with it put everyone on edge. Many government officials told Americans that communists could be lurking everywhere, as teachers, journalists, or college professors. The Red Scare even pushed some of our own government into disloyalty. Senator Joe McCarthy of Wisconsin revealed that he had a list of government employees and officials that he claimed were loyal to the Soviet Union. McCarthy enjoyed a lavish career and much success. The scare was also promoted in other ways, leading to loss of employment in journalists, teachers, and the government staff. A tragedy, to be sure. Stalin also pushed communism into Germany. This document is a letter of instructions to increase security on the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall separated Berlin's families and friends for many, many years. Stalin also pushed the economy of his government forward with his 5-year plans. The momentum of this rapid industrialization led to this document, Gorbachev's plans, which then led to the fall of the entire Soviet Union. Stalin at first tried to help his country, which ended with its fall. One of Stalin's many goals for Russia was its military. He wanted Russia to grow a lot in this area. The video of this first Soviet atomic bomb test shows the lengths that Stalin pushed Russia to. This fueled tensions between the United States and Russia. It was a great help in instigating the arms race in the Cold War. To review, Stalin took power in Russia through manipulative means. He denounced his greatest political enemy, banishing a voice of change that may have helped the Russian people. He did this not because he thought it was the right thing to do, but because it was the only way that he could stay in power. Instead of compromising with a class of farmers who wouldn't listen to him, he killed or imprisoned millions of them, then causing an even greater tragedy, the Ukrainian famine, to happen. This could have been avoided with simple flexibility. Stalin ordered many killed in the Great Purge. Those who threatened his throne were quickly executed so that Stalin could execute his own plans. As many can see, Stalin took power in Russia and then proceeded to make things much worse for the population than they ever had before. He brought the triumph of starting anew for Russia into a nightmarish tragedy.